The chandeliers in my New Jersey home gleamed brighter than they ever had, as if the walls themselves wanted to celebrate the end of my career. After selling Astoria Consulting for $23 million, my son insisted I deserved a party. He wasn't wrong. At 70, I had built the firm from nothing after my husband's death, and now my colleagues, neighbors, and distant relatives crowded into the rooms I had once thought too large for one woman. But something felt off. My daughter, Celine, moved through the space like a hostess trained by Martha Stewart herself, checking flower arrangements, aligning silver trays, and clasping guests' hands with practiced warmth. This was the same woman who had once complained about setting a dinner table. I watched her linger near the champagne station, her pale hair falling like a curtain as she leaned over the flutes. I knew those glasses well. One had a small chip at the rim, always mine at every gathering. My stomach tightened when I saw her slip a tiny vial from her purse, tilting it just enough to release its contents into the chipped glass. She glanced around. But my years in boardrooms had taught me how to look without seeming to. My blood chilled, but my face did not change. When she picked up the glass and approached me, her voice carried the same honey she used as a child when asking for money. "Mother, you must be tired. Let me bring you the first toast." I accepted it with steady hands, thanking her as if she'd given me a bouquet. Just then, she turned slightly away, phone pressed against her cheek, whispering words I was never meant to hear. "She won't make it past tonight." A smile touched my lips, not from humor, but from the sharp recognition of betrayal crystallizing into resolve. As she leaned to greet another guest, I shifted the flute into the hands of her old school friend, Marjorie, who had been hovering nearby. Marjorie clinked her glass happily, oblivious to its altered contents. I raised an untouched flute from the tray and let the bubbles tickle my nose. My gaze fixed on Celine's flawless performance. It was the beginning of a night that would test every lesson I had ever learned about survival. And as laughter filled the room, I knew the true story was only just beginning. When my husband died, Celine was barely a teenager, and I was left staring at a mortgage, a stack of medical bills, and a child whose grief came out in tantrums and slammed doors. I promised myself I would not let either of us sink. That promise birthed Astoria Consulting from the spare bedroom of our modest home. The early years were brutal. I worked dawn to midnight, living on coffee and adrenaline, knocking on doors that slammed in my face until one opened. Every contract I won felt like a lifeline. I sold the jewelry my husband had given me on our 10th anniversary just to pay for Celine's first semester at St. Catherine's Academy. I skipped vacations, skipped dinners, skipped sleep, yet Celine never went without. She wore the best uniforms, carried the latest phone, joined ski trips I could never afford for myself. I wanted her to have everything I hadn't, believing that love meant giving until it hurt. Astoria grew, and with it, so did the gap between us. I was always at the office, and she was always asking for more. By the time she reached college, I was signing tuition checks that rivaled down payments on houses. When she graduated, I bought her a car in cash, while I kept driving the same aging sedan. To me, these were investments in her future. To her, they became expectations. The weight of those years still lingers in my bones, a constant reminder that sacrifice can harden into habit, and perhaps it can also feed a sense of entitlement in the one who benefits most. My reverie was broken by the sound of shattering glass. Back in the present, Marjorie had collapsed, her champagne flute skittering across the marble floor. Foam flecked her lips as guests gasped and scrambled. Celine dropped to her knees with a wail so dramatic it might have fooled a stranger, clutching at Marjorie's arm as if heartbroken. Someone shouted for an ambulance, and I knelt too, though not for Celine's performance, but to steady the woman who had unknowingly taken my place. Celine clutched Marjorie's hand with a tremor so precise it might have been rehearsed. "Somebody do something," she cried, her voice pitched high enough to pierce through the chaos. Guests crowded in, murmuring, speculating, some fumbling with their phones to call for help. "She's always had stomach issues," Celine insisted, wiping at tears that never seemed to fall. "It must be something she ate." She turned to me with wide, innocent eyes, as if begging me to confirm her story. I only nodded faintly, unwilling to spoil her theater before the curtain had even risen. When the paramedics arrived, she pivoted her explanation seamlessly. Maybe it was her medications. She mixes so many things. The lie slid from her tongue as easily as honey, leaving the guests nodding sympathetically. Only I saw the flicker of calculation beneath her mask. I'd seen it before, though in smaller ways. Years back, she had pressed me about my will, laughing it off as curiosity. More recently, she suggested that I should simplify my assets, move money into a joint account for convenience. Convenience for whom I'd brushed her off then. But her persistence had stayed with me. Standing there in the glow of the chandeliers, watching her orchestrate pity with the precision of a maestro, I felt no surprise. I didn't survive hostile acquisitions and boardroom betrayals by missing tells. Celine's act was polished, but I had lived too long among liars to confuse performance with panic. I followed the ambulance to the hospital, staying a careful step behind her weeping display. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and fear. When the doctor approached us, his words were clinical, but sharp as glass. "Acute poisoning," he said. "Plant alkaloids. Not something we see by accident." Celine gasped dramatically. Pressing a manicured hand to her mouth, I simply listened, silent, filing every word like evidence in a case I already knew I would have to build. The phone rang before sunrise, its shrill tone pulling me from the half-sleep that comes after too many troubling thoughts. Celine's name lit the screen. I let it buzz until it stopped, only for it to start again minutes later. By the third call, I answered. "Mother," she said, syrup dripping from every syllable. I couldn't sleep. I kept worrying. "How are you feeling this morning? Any dizziness? Any stomach upset?" Her voice was tender enough to fool an outsider, but to me, it sounded like a fisherman tugging at a line, waiting to see if the hook had set. "I'm perfectly fine," I replied evenly. "Fit as ever." A pause, then a laugh too light to be natural. That's such a relief. After what happened to Marjorie, I thought maybe it was something in the champagne. "You didn't drink too much, did you?" She wanted confirmation that her plan had failed. I gave her none. When the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table with my ledger of memories. Celine's finances had been unraveling for years. Her boutique shop in Princeton folded within 18 months, but not before she drained a line of credit in my name to help with cash flow. She and Ambrose bought a sprawling home on a cul-de-sac with a second mortgage stacked on the first. Convinced they'd grow into it, they leased luxury cars, booked vacations, and filled closets with designer labels, all while drowning in bills. And me, I had written checks. Quietly, dutifully. Tuition at St. Catherine's, 4 years at Wellesley. The down payment on that house when Celine cried about Emma needing the right neighborhood. A brand new car to replace the one she wrecked. More than $200,000 over 5 years. Each payment dressed up as generosity. I once thought she saw those gifts as love, but last night's whisper at the party told me otherwise. In her eyes, I hadn't been giving, I'd been advancing her inheritance, and I was late delivering the rest. The realization settled like ash, dark and bitter, and it was still clinging to me when she appeared at my door the next morning, pastries in hand and a new scheme in her smile. Celine breezed in as if nothing had happened. The the pink box of pastries swinging from her wrist like a peace offering. "Your favorites," she sang, setting them down on the counter. "Cranberry scones. I thought you could use some comfort." She poured coffee as though she owned the kitchen, then leaned against the island, her tone softening into practiced concern. "Mother, last night was terrifying. What if it had been you living alone at your age? Anything could happen. A fall? A sudden illness? No one would know until it was too late." I let her words hang, sipping my coffee in silence. She smiled gently, as if waiting for me to agree. "Ambrose and I have been researching options. There's this beautiful place outside Philadelphia Sunset Manor. It's more like a resort than a retirement home. Spa, cultural programs, full medical staff. You'd never feel alone again." Her eyes sparkled as she unfolded a glossy brochure from her bag. Pictures of manicured gardens and cheerful seniors in pastel sweaters beamed up at me. "The only thing is," she continued lightly, "they require an upfront fee. About $400,000. But it covers everything for life. And, of course, they need a power of attorney on file, just a formality, so someone responsible can handle your finances if anything happens." The trap was as elegant as it was predictable. Remove me from my home, tuck me away behind manicured hedges, and strip me of access to my own fortune. I felt the familiar steel of boardroom battles return, cold and sharp. I smiled at her, feigning hesitation. "It does sound interesting. Let me think about it." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand with rehearsed warmth. "That's all I ask." But I was already planning my next move. Cornelius Hartwell's office had always felt like a sanctuary, walnut shelves lined with heavy law books, a window that framed the river below, and the quiet steadiness of a man who had guided me through every storm since my husband's death. When I told him about Celine's suggestion of Sunset Manor and the request for power of attorney, his brows drew together in a line as deep as the years I'd known him. "Drusilla," he said gravely, "I've seen this before. Families who can't wait for inheritance. They don't always go after money directly. Sometimes they try to prove incompetence, a psychiatric evaluation, a diagnosis once that's on record. A court can strip you of control faster than you think." I folded my hands to keep them from trembling. "On what basis I run my affairs better than half the men my age?" "That's not the point," he replied. "All it takes is the right doctor. There's one in particular, Richard Veyron, geriatric psychiatrist. His reports always seem to lean in favor of the family petitioning. If your daughter hires him, it will be an uphill battle." The name burned into my mind as I drove home. That night, unable to sleep, I searched through old emails Celine had sent me. One, tucked between invitations and bank reminders, chilled me a receipt for a consultation fee paid to Richard Veyron 3 months ago. The file attached was worse. A draft report bearing my name, stating early signs of cognitive decline and recommendation for supervised living. My heart pounded as I read the forged words, crafted to paint me as frail, confused, unfit to guard my own life. Rage flared, hot and merciless. But beneath it lay sorrow so heavy it bent my chest. My daughter wasn't merely greedy. She was building a coffin of paper and signatures, lowering me into it while I still breathed. I closed the file with hands that no longer shook. If Celine wanted a war of documents, she had chosen the wrong opponent. The next morning, I would begin rewriting every plan she thought she already controlled. The morning after discovering Veyron's report, I sat across from Cornelius again, this time with no tremor in my voice. "Rewrite everything," I told him. "Every clause, every directive. If Celine wants to play with paper, let her find it cuts her instead." By the end of the week, my estate looked nothing like the one she imagined. The bulk of my fortune was now earmarked for medical research and scholarships. Celine would receive a modest trust. $50,000 a year at most, enough to live, never enough to splurge. And hidden within the language of the documents was the safeguard I cherished most if anyone dared question my competency. The trust shifted instantly to charity, leaving my daughter with nothing. While Cornelius handled the law, I handled the walls around me. A security team installed cameras in every entryway, motion sensors across the grounds, and a panic system that would summon the police in under 3 minutes. To the neighbors, I joked about package theft. To myself, I knew it was preparation for something far uglier. Still, steel alone cannot hold a heart. That afternoon, I walked through my rose garden, pruning the thorny stems Harold had planted decades earlier. Their blooms would come in spring, but the thorns were already sharp. A reminder that beauty survives because it knows how to defend itself. It was there that I encountered Eleanor Pierce, my next-door neighbor, and, in a way, Celine's mother-in-law by community gossip and proximity. She hesitated before speaking, lowering her voice as though the hedges had ears. I overheard Celine at the market last week. She said, "When Mom finally goes, I'll finally breathe." She laughed when she said it. Drusilla, it chilled me. I thanked her, though the words only hardened what I already knew. They thought I was fragile, a tired woman ready to be buried in paper and pills. I pressed my palm against a rose stem, feeling the thorn break skin. "They forget," I whispered. "I have thorns too." The sting steadied me as I prepared for the confrontation I knew was coming. They arrived at 9 sharp. Celine carrying a leather folder as if it contained salvation. Ambrose trailing behind with the strained smile of a man rehearsing calm. She kissed my cheek, laid the papers on the dining table, and poured me coffee without asking, as though she already owned the house. "Mother," she began sweetly, "we've done all the work for you. Here's the Sunset Manor contract, the financial disclosure forms, and, of course, the power of attorney. It's all very standard." I feigned hesitation, touching the pen like it might burn me. "It's a lot of reading." I murmured. "That's why we're here," Ambrose said quickly. "We'll guide you through it. All you need to do is sign." I let them explain every page, their voices too bright, too eager, betraying the hunger beneath their smiles. Finally, with a sigh, I scrawled my name across the documents, sliding them back across the table. Celine's face lit up in triumph. "You won't regret this, Mother. It's for your own safety." Before she could gather the papers, the doorbell rang. I rose, steady on my feet, and opened the door to find 2 detectives standing there. Their badges flashed in the morning light. "Mrs. Drusilla Hale," the taller one asked, "we need to speak with you regarding the champagne served at your party." Celine froze, color draining from her face. Ambrose stiffened. The detective stepped inside, holding a sealed evidence bag. Inside was the half-empty bottle I had tucked away after the party. Toxicology confirmed oleander extract. Highly lethal. It was added deliberately. Celine's hands fluttered, searching for words. That's impossible. It must have been a mistake. I sat down calmly, folding my hands. No mistake. I kept that bottle for precisely this reason. The room went silent, except for the scratch of the detective's pen as he began taking notes. And I watched Celine's triumph collapse into the fear she had once hoped to see in me. The detectives laid the next piece of evidence on the table, a copy of a life insurance policy I had never authorized. My name printed neatly, the beneficiary listed as Celine, $500,000. Taken out only months ago. Celine's voice cracked as she protested. "That's ridiculous." I didn't. But I had already retrieved the folder. Cornelius prepared for me. I slid across the receipts of her payments to Dr. Richard Veyron, along with printed messages she thought I would never see. Draft the report soon. Need proof of cognitive decline. Once she's at Sunset Manor, we'll control everything. Celine's mask slipped. Her lips curled, eyes flashing with the coldness she had hidden beneath layers of charm. You don't understand. Mother, you've had everything. I was suffocating under your shadow. I steadied my hands on the table. No, Celine, I built everything for you, and you chose to turn it into a weapon against me. Ambrose shifted in his chair, pale and silent, until the detectives produced bank transfers in his name payments to Veyron's office. Small, but regular. His head dropped. I only wanted to help her. I didn't think it would go this far. The officers didn't flinch. Attempted murder for Celine. Conspiracy for Ambrose. As the cuffs clicked around their wrists, my heart did not race. It beat with a steady, aching rhythm, carrying the weight of years of sacrifice now twisted into betrayal. I whispered, not for them, but for myself. I raised a daughter to shine, and she chose shadow. Celine lifted her chin defiantly as they led her out, but her eyes darted back once, searching for something she had already burned beyond recognition, and I, left in the silence of my own home, prepared to face what came after the storm. Spring came soft and green, the kind of season that makes even an old house breathe differently. My garden stirred back to life, the roses pushing through with stubborn color. These weren't just any roses. They had grown from cuttings Harold once planted, carefully tended year after year. Their blooms were proof that some things survive if you care for them long enough. The storm had passed, though its scars remained. Celine now sat behind bars, awaiting years that would not be kind to her. Ambrose had slipped into bankruptcy, his name whispered with contempt among the very circles he once courted. Justice had been served, but there was no triumph in it, only the heavy knowledge of how far blood will go when blinded by greed. I spent my mornings among the roses, hands in the soil, feeling the earth remind me that renewal is patient work. One afternoon, as the sun broke through the clouds, a soft knock pulled me from the garden. It was Isolde, my granddaughter, her eyes red from tears but steady with something her parents had never carried: humility. "Grandmother," she said, voice trembling, "I'm sorry. I didn't know what they were planning. I don't want to be like them. I want to live differently." I drew her close, the scent of roses following us inside. "Child," I whispered, "love may open doors, but only respect keeps them open." She nodded, pressing her face against my shoulder, and in that moment, I felt a crack of light pierce the darkness Celine had left behind. Now, my fortune no longer feels like a chain others try to snatch. It has become a key. Grants, scholarships, and charities now carry my name into places where desperation does not breed betrayal. I am free, wiser, and my wealth finally serves those who will never turn it into poison. And as the roses outside bloom brighter each day, I know I will never again mistake silence for weakness, nor generosity for chains.